All right, hey everybody, welcome back to Hawman's Advice Forum. I'm the Hawman, and we're going to answer all your comments, questions on Ask Me Anything that I posted October 20th. And let's get to it. So, the first comment question by Chris Regan, you say, I wanted to say that your videos have been very informative compared to most content online, which I've learned to tune out. Basically, what's most covered on the news. For my question, there's one book by Noam Chomsky called Manufacturing Consent, where he talks about how even in free societies and democracies, problems can still occur. There are two main points that I list, and I'll just ask for any thoughts. Most of the time, people will go on with what most people do, regardless of rationality, where it's diet, clothing, technology usage, to the political conversation occurs in a narrow window where among the window there's lively debate, but ideas considered fringe or deviant are not to be discussed or considered. P.S. I'm planning on taking a break from almost all the internet for 2 months, so I won't be able to send another account for an AMA. However, I don't really ask questions anymore, and just to discuss more, I'll send an email around Christmas to give an update. In the meantime, your content has been quite helpful. Well, glad to hear that. So, I guess I'll just kind of give you my thoughts about your talking points. So the first, I don't know if your questions were related to the known Chomsky book called Manufacturing Consent, but let's just talk about that. I'm not really too familiar with Noam Chomsky. I know a little bit about him. I know he's a linguist at MIT, and I know he's a liberal. And I know there was one dude years ago who made a theory that contradicted Noam Chomsky's theory about grammar, and then he got like super defensive about it. And I think the other guy might have been right, and I forgot who it was. I probably have to search it up on the internet. But the guy's a linguist and a kind of a left-leaning liberal type of dude, or a dude with those type of political leanings. And I'll be honest, like if people kind of that's their leanings, I kind of tune out, right? If that's the type of political ideology of views that they present to the public, or as their exterior, I really don't care. I'm not really into. Maybe he has some good ideas, but I'm not going to look too into it just because I'm not into leftist people. It's kind of like if you're a vegan and then you see like the exterior of a restaurant and all they do is sell meat products, you ain't going to enter that restaurant. Same thing. Like I don't like leftist ideas. So maybe you do have a good idea here or two there, but I don't want to like look deep into it because I only have so much time in the day. But if he talks about how free societies and democracies problems can occur, I totally agree with that, and that's just true of human society in general. There's never been a time in human society where suffering wasn't the norm. I mean, maybe when I was a kid in early '90s, maybe for a short period of time, I thought everything was cool and okay, but in the whole, but in for human history and human society as a whole, there's never been a time where there wasn't pain and suffering for the majority of the population. Now, I'm just paraphrasing Milton Friedman. That's what he said. And so I agree with that. And I don't think that's anything mind blowing. I mean, so for example, let's say you live in rural America and the only jobs there are is like Amazon, Walmart, McDonald's. Your life is going to suck pretty much. Unless you're one of those like people who work in tech and working, can live anywhere you want, and so you get a great deal in a rural property, and just as long as you have an internet connection, you can make money. Your life's going to be great. But for the average person who lives in rural America and doesn't have the so-called, I wouldn't call it a hustle. Maybe you could call it connections, or just the mindset that hey, like you don't have to work a shitty job just because there's a factory near your neighborhood. Their life is going to suck. And if you ever watch just a documentary on Amazon, or the working conditions in Amazon where you can't even go to the bathroom, and you're working like a dog and they'll treat you like a slave, it's mind blowing. I honestly think any sort of documentary like that would be much more mind blowing than whatever Noam Chomsky has to say. Maybe he has some good things to say. I don't know, right? Because I don't read his. I didn't. I'm at the stage in my life where I'm not just studying books for the sake of books anymore, and I got to really apply the knowledge that I do have to during the time I've been alive. Because I'm not at the stage of developmental stage of life. I guess I'm a fully developed or grown adult, And so none of these things are really surprising to me at this stage of life. Maybe it would have been surprising when I was 16 or 17, where the adults in charge presented me a worldview where if I just follow the rules and I'll be happy. And turns out that life doesn't sucks for most people, right? So it sucks in so-called free societies, democracies, and we're not even supposed to live in a democracy. We're supposed to live in a republic. And in a democracy, what happens is that if 51% of people have bad ideas and they vote those bad ideas in, guess what? Those bad ideas are going to affect you. But supposedly in a republic, we're supposed to have smarter people who are supposed to represent us in society. And so which is used to prevent the dumb masses from voting in dumb ideas. So there's cons and pros to any sort of political system, but I think some are better than others, but I'm not a political expert. So let's go to your 2 points. Most of the time, people go on with most people do, regardless of rationality, whether it's diet, clothing, technology usage. And that's because, so let me make a point about that. That's because most people are very passive and they don't contribute and they just expect to get a paycheck at work and then go home and I don't know, eat pizza or something or eat fast food. Most people really don't consider how to make their communities a better place, how to make society a better place. You know, they don't understand consequences, that their actions have consequences, and they think they could be as selfish as possible. And then they're wondering, you know, why is it that, you know, you look at the surveys of young people, they're the most unhappiest group. They're even more unhappier than senior citizens, which is mind blowing. You think the old people who are about to, you know, are going to die within 10 years, you think they'd be very unhappy, right? But it's the young people that they're unhappy. Why? Because they're living a lifestyle where it's just about me, 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 and I don't care about anybody else. And then they keep that same mindset as an adult, so they don't mature. And then they wonder why they're unhappy, because they're not thinking about their community, their country, their family, the people around them. It's just, I'm thinking about me and I'm going to be the most selfish as possible. And you look at pretty much any major religion in the world, they always talk about how selfishness doesn't, you know, is not a righteous thing, and bad things will happen when you are selfish, right? And so that's really the issue with most people. They're just we've raised a generation where, and this is true of my generation too, where people are just completely selfish and they don't really think of the consequences of their actions, and then they wonder why society is going down the dumps. You look at a place like Los Angeles. Los Angeles is pretty much the number one poster child for I'm selfish and I don't care about anybody else. And then people wonder why, like, oh, why is the cost of living so high? Oh, why are there so many homeless people in tents right next to my luxury apartment that cost me like $3,000 or $4,000 a month to live in, right? A lot of dumbass thinking that goes on in Los Angeles. And so you have to be the agent of change and be a good model for other people to follow, even if no one around you is following what you're doing, because what's going to happen, kind of like, and I know this is kind of a bad example, North Korea and South Korea, right? One society, one group of people will decide to go in one direction, and you'll see a totally different outcome from the other group of people who decide that they're going to take society in another direction. And that's what you have to be. Maybe you're going to, I personally think that North Korea and South Korea are both failed societies, but one is more economically prosperous than the other, right? And that's what you have to be in your life. You got to be the odd man out and say, hey, if society is going in one direction, I got to lead society out of that hole, hole that it's dug itself into. And I got to be a good model for everybody else, even if everybody else is doing the exact opposite of what I'm doing. And that's what you got to be, right? All right, so let's go to point number 2. The political conversation occurs in a narrow window where among the window there's a lively debate, but ideas considered fringe or deviant are not discussed or considered. And I'm going to make a point about that, right? So whenever there's a talking point in Robert Greene's book, 48 Laws of Power, where like he talks about you can't really talk about extreme change where people will really feel uncomfortable. You can't. Even if their house is burning down and you're trying to like teach them, hey man, you got to do the exact opposite of what you're doing so your house doesn't burn down. most people don't really feel comfortable with that. And I always thought that was the stupidest thing ever. But hey, that's how most people are. So if you want to kind of instill change in society, I really think that you kind of have to use the boiling the frog method, where like, you sort of gradually make the changes without people really noticing it, instead of all at once. So I think what happens is that, and this is true with both good and bad ideas, but a lot of bad ideas have seeped into society because people decided that they're going to make changes and they didn't really feel the effects of it because it was like one little change at the time. But then all of a sudden, all those bad ideas added up, and then we're like, whoa, how did we get here? And that's kind of what's happened with the bad ideas in society. So what I gotta say is we gotta use that same method, boiling the frog, where we have our good ideas, slowly introduce them to people, right? And make them see like the benefits of what we're doing. And it's gonna be it's a hard battle because most people, they never really dig themselves out a hole that they're in, which is sad. So I get it, and it's kind of like, you see the politicians, they never talk about like actually changing society. They talk about change, but they never do anything, right? And there are some fringe or deviant ideas that most people won't even consider. Like, for example, like cutting Social Security is considered to be political suicide. And it kind of goes to like another question, like should that have even been made in the first place? But that's like another discussion. I'm not an expert on that, so I won't like really discuss it. But if you do have fringe or deviant ideas, whether it's good or bad, really you just gotta quote boil a frog and make sure you introduce those changes slowly over time, or else people really they freak out when things are out of their comfort zone. So all right, cool. So if you're on a break for 2 months, that's a good detox. I don't have the luxury of detoxing from the internet because that's how I make my money. But good deal, man. You do your best. You be the leader that you can in your own small area, and even if no one listens to you, God's on your side, right? And I always kind of felt that when I was alone by myself, and I'm just trying to be the best that I can be. And I think that's why at this stage of my life, I don't really fear things anymore because I spent a good majority of my time trying to build myself. And who knows, maybe the world might end next year, But at the same time, we always got to try our best in good or bad times to help others, help ourselves be their best, and, make sure that society's not in some sort of a spiral or downfall, which is kind of sad. But yeah, that's all I got to say about that. So let's go to the next question. Jim Crime, you say, I don't normally ask about politics, but there's a lot of news for the 2020 election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I remember one time when asking about political polarization, you said if people had communities in real life instead of clinging to the media or political party, then the problem would largely go away, which I agree with. So this is actually talked about in The True Believer. Right. So you see a lot of political fanaticism these days, especially with the leftist groups, leftist people. And one of the things that Eric Hoffer talks about in The True Believer is the reason why fanatics come out in society is because there's a lack of community. Right. You yearn for change. You have no one to identify with. And so you realize that, hey, there has to be some sort of I don't like where society is going, and you go fucking crazy because you don't have people to relate around with. And I think just as normal human beings, we feel emotional comfort when we're around human beings that we can relate to and care about. And because we don't have that, and because we live in a society that says, hey, you're just an individual on your own, most people go fucking crazy and they don't know how to handle that. And that's more explained in the book. And I'm probably kind of doing a bad job summarizing it, but that's pretty much what's happening. A lot of things that are happening right now, they were observed by Eric Hoffer, and I think the Ted Kaczynski, he talked about it too on his manifesto. If you heard of the Unabomber Manifesto, basically it was a dude who was a university professor, who was kind of like an antisocial recluse. He was very smart and intelligent, and then he went fucking crazy and started bombing universities, the airlines, and they called him the Unabomber in the media. And he wrote a manifesto basically saying, hey, we got to reverse technological progress or we're going to have a bunch of crazy lefties in our society because what they want is power, and our technological society pretty much diminishes the power that the average individual has, and the average individual has less power than, let's say, a caveman would have. Because every time there's a change, the change is imposed in all of society, and the individual man doesn't have any, like, what you would call it, decision-making power in what the changes are, and so they go fucking crazy. And you know, there's a lot of, like, explanation to his manifesto about why, like, there's so many lefties in a technological society. But yeah, so back to my point. I really do think that a lot of political polarization is just from a lack of community. The fact that, you know, you're just an individual and that people don't care about you. And so in order to feel important, you know, another point is that in order to feel important about yourselves, you always have to talk about change and you know, accuse society of doing things that they don't do, things that they actually already do, right? And that's kind of like how in our society, how we probably have more, you know, do more for women and you know, are less racist than anybody else, but you know, the leftist people always accuse society of things that we actually do, saying that we don't do things that we actually do. And also, by the way, I don't actually like condone what the Unabomber did. I actually condemned, you know, killing people is not right. No, you know, murdering people and bombing universities and airlines is not right. But I do concede that he does have some good talking points. But a lot of it, I think, was inspired by Eric Hoffer, the True Believer. But yeah, so I'm just kind of rattling on, and I know my thoughts are kind of scatterbrained, and they're not like directly related to each other. But I do agree with you that a lot of the political fanaticism really comes just from a lack of community, and that people don't care about each other, right? And that's why the young people are the most unhappiest, because they're so, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but like they're so, you know, they can't live without their technological devices, right? Like they have to be with their smartphone. They're addicted to it. And they almost see technology as a replacement for normal human interaction, which is kind of fucking sad. All right, so it's enough rambling for now. If you have any thoughts, comments, leave them below, and I'll see you guys next time.